Hello again, Facebook. I decided that since the other video went so well, that I would at least go over what the parts of the loom are so you kind of understood a little more what you were looking at. I do have my trusty feline assistant here, Jasper. Oh, no. There you go. Now you can see him. Anyway, so more or less what we're going to look at is that I have a floor loom. It's a smaller one, so it actually can be compact and broken down. The legs can be taken off of it and it can be transported. Some of the other looms, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with Revolutionary War reenacting, but there's a local reenacting location once a year that has what I like to call a castle loom. It basically takes up a whole entire bedroom for the apparatus. It can't be moved or broken down unless you break it down into its simple parts and transport it out. It's made from like beams of a barn. This one's a much smaller version, made out of cherry hardwood. And I guess we'll just flip it around here and so you can see it, and I'll go through all of the parts. Sorry about the shaky cam here. There we go. Alright. So the parts that we have, more or less, is there's the front portion or header board. I already have about 3 feet finished from yesterday already. And so I inadvertently made a pattern. It wasn't intentional, it just sort of happened that way. Oh, there goes the shuttle. Let me pick that up. Okay. Actually, you can zoom in there a little bit. You can actually see the silver threads. Well, not really silver, but gray threads. There we go. It's actually coming into focus. So that's what it looks like when woven up. So you have the header board here, and this is the woven fabric. You basically put all of the warp, which is this part, all the warp is on the back side of the loom, which we'll show you right here. It's all woven around. Now you have to separate it. You can't just wind it on top of itself where it will tangle. So I'm using old bath towels as a means of keeping the area separated. You can use paper. That's the most common that I've seen folks use, like not a wrapping paper, it's a little thin, more like a heavier brown paper. So you basically have your threads coming in from the back, and you're basically working it. The shed is what this is called right here, where it's open. The weave that I'm working on, which I didn't really get to discuss yesterday, is what they call a tabby weave. It's basically very similar to what you would be familiar with as a basket weave, just in and out, up and down, from going in and out of your vertical items, vertical yarns. And this portion is called the beater. That is the technical term for it. And what that does is that sets your weft yarn into place. And there's different varieties of yarn, of course, that you could use with this, but you need something that can take tension. I have a whole bunch of hand spun yarn that I created like this. I don't know if it'll come into focus here a little bit. There we go. But what I was worried is this is single ply. It's not been plied with any other yarn. And what I was afraid of is that eventually, if I didn't have it plied and I made it into a warp like this, which is taking tension, that they would snap and I would have a whole bunch of imperfections in my fabric, because if you had to tie pieces together, you have little knots and bumps and things like that as you weave along. This item is called the shuttle. Basically, you have a spool. There's normally always a hole of some variety on it. As you're going through, it feeds off of the spool. And I have a different variety of shuttles, actually, that I was able to buy. So I'm going to show you some really neat stuff here. Okay, this is my basket of fun stuff here. So we have, besides, of course, scissors, we have a whole bunch of different kinds of yarn. And this is all hand spun by me. So we have some white, we have some brown, and some gray. I was originally going to do varieties on the fabric. When you change the color of the weft yarn, you can get stripes. You'll get horizontal stripes in your fabric. Vertical stripes come from your warp, which I did on another piece. I ended up having blue, then green. Well, actually it was white and blue back and forth. So I just varied the kind of yarn that you have, and you will get a vertical stripe. If you change this color, then you'll get a horizontal stripe. So a little bit of a trick there. But because this warp yarn is plied with two different colors, that's how we're getting this really nifty sort of zigzag pattern in the fabric. It's actually just coming from mainly the warp yarn. Let me pull the beater forward here. Now this can be quite clanky, so that's why I'm not weaving in front of you, and I would have to find some sort of apparatus to hold the phone. But these portions on the back are called heddles. It's what they call a rigid heddle loom is what it's called. Now I'm going to step back so you can kind of see the whole setup here. It looks bigger in the video than what it really is. It's probably only about 24 inches wide or so. Maybe a little wider. And then it, of course, has the little legs, and I have everything underneath is just for weaving alone. So these move up and down in sets of 2 to make the tabby weave pattern, the basic pattern that we're working on. And so as I'm working, these actually will move, as you can see, if I move them, that moves up and down. So I basically switch between these two, and they move the heddles up and down, and as I'm moving them up and down, I push the shuttle through. So basically the whole mechanics of it is you throw the shuttle through, you beat the yarn into place. You can even use a comb, is what I've been doing. If the beater doesn't set it into place, I'll use a comb and make sure it's set in there. I switch my heddles. So, see how those pop up. So, and then those go all the way down. And so I've changed my yarns. So the ones that were on the bottom moved to the top, and vice versa. And so then I would put this all the way through, and then switch it again. And you would just do this repeatedly. The trick to it, and I'll show you one of the mistakes here, is that sometimes you'll get a yarn that wants to be down when it should be up. And I have about 2 or 3 over on the other side that are doing the same thing. So instead of me being able to throw the shuttle back and forth very easily, I have to make sure I'm picking out my yarns, and that they're not, that some of these warp like that should be up like that. Instead, it's trying to sit down. And I figured out what my problem was with some of these errors that I'm seeing, which is when I threaded the loom, I should have done it slightly differently, but this is a whole learning process, so that's something to do with it. But yeah, this is made out of cherry hardwood, so it's actually pretty sturdy stuff. A loom like this can cost a good $1,200. I was lucky, I got this one, which was used for about $400. And I've been having a lot of fun with it so far. I'm just trying to think here. and how I don't think I could quite make a 36-inch wide fabric, but I could come up with something pretty close. But anyway, that's how the loom works. That's some of the parts and how it functions and how you create fabric from yarn, which of course this would be a woven fabric compared to what we know as knits, which are a little bit, knitting is completely different than weaving. But that is some of the tools, so if you have any questions, feel free to post in the comments. Have a good one.